Hi folks, this is Klaus at Top Hydraulics. We have a beautiful 2007 Jaguar XK here today. The convertible top system in XKs is identical in model years 2007 through 2013. And with these cars, some of these cars being more than 10 years old now, you will see more and more failures of the hydraulic system. I will soon show you how it all works, what can fail on the system, and also how to take these parts out of the car yourself. It is a lot easier than you might think, and I hope this video helps. So here we have the hydraulic system for the Jaguar XK convertible top. It consists of the hydraulic pump that is in the right rear of the trunk. Here is the tonneau cover cylinder, which lifts the storage cover up and pulls it down again. And we have the two main lift cylinders, left side and right side. And we have the tension rod cylinders, left side and right side. And we have two hoses going to each cylinder. So depending on what the pump is being told to do, which valves to open, fluid will be directed to these cylinders to either extend the cylinder shafts or retract them, and that way move the top around. And either hose can be a supply hose or a return hose. Now, what goes wrong on these systems is the most typical failure actually in the long run are going to be leaking cylinders. These cylinders are made with obsolescence in mind, I'm sorry to say. They could have done a lot better job, but you will find the same problem in every modern convertible top. The seals in the cylinders decay with time. In a hot climate, they may go bad as soon as after 8 years. In a cool climate, they may last 15 or at the very max 20 years. The decay of these polyurethane seals is a chemical reaction, and as you've learned in high school, chemical reactions are typically accelerated by heat. What also can go wrong is if you're in a humid climate, that you accumulate moisture in the system simply because as the cylinders expand and contract, the fluid level in the reservoir changes, and thus outside air gets sucked in, and the outside air has moisture in it. If the air in the reservoir cools down, suddenly you have condensation, and that condensation will initially sink to the bottom of the reservoir, but in the long run the pump might suck up water, and water is bad news for both the original seals inside the cylinders and possibly for the cylinders themselves. The hoses are made almost as cheaply as they could be made just to make the top work for X number of cycles, but the manufacturers have skimped a little bit on the material. If the hose walls were thicker, then the hoses would last longer. However, hoses are not currently the main problem on these top systems. We find a lot of bad pumps. Well, what can go wrong in a pump? The pump has an electric motor, of course. The electric motor turns a piston assembly that has a number of pistons, and there are 3 valves on top that divert the fluid, and a lot of internal valves inside this pump, and we have the pressure relief valve here as well. What can go wrong is, again, seals inside the pump go bad, or pistons wear out, or the electric motor wears, or the internal valves in this pump block go bad. These pumps are very expensive from Jaguar, which seems wrong, but we have an alternative for you. Top Hydraulics has the rebuild service for these pumps and for all the cylinders. We even provide new lines if you need them, or we even offer a core exchange where we ship parts from our inventory first, then you swap them in and send back your old parts for a refund of the core deposit. So we're trying to make it really easy, and hopefully this video helps once we get into the guts of the car to show you how to take these cylinders out once you find leaks on them. Now the leaks on the cylinders, surprisingly, you will typically first find on the bottom, such as through the mounting hole of this main lift cylinder. Then the next leak might be on the top. These cylinders have on average 7 seals inside of them. Ultimately all those seals go bad. Top Hydraulics puts in better seals. We actually open these cylinders up and have our own custom CNC machine metal parts put into these cylinders that can accommodate better seals that are made of longer lasting material and have better shape to them. So we expect our rebuilds to last somewhere between 30 and 50 years, which is a big deal compared to the originals lasting somewhere between 8 and 15 years in most cases. So here we have the soft top partially open, and particularly we have the tonneau cover or storage cover open, and this is the position in which you can already take out 3 of the 5 cylinders really easily. We have here on the right side the tonneau cover cylinder that has a plastic cover on it. On the left side is only a gas strut that helps keep the tonneau cover open. And then we have 4 cylinders top there, the 2 tension rod cylinders, one on the right side matching on the other side, mounted here just on a couple of ball joints. And we also have the main lift cylinders that lift the soft top up and down. The tension rod cylinders are responsible for lifting the rear portion of the soft top, meaning the rear bow or the part with a glass window in it, up and down. They also do a little bit of movement on the front of the top. Anyway, the main lift cylinders are the ones that are a little bit harder to get to. They are mounted horizontally inside the soft top frame on one end, and farther into the car on the other end, basically mounted horizontally like this. Imagine this setting, just a foot down and a foot inward. To get to this position, obviously you can just stop the top in this position if your pump hasn't run out of fluid yet. If your pump has run out of fluid because you had a leak on one of these cylinders, then you've probably already learned how to move this top manually. That is, the pump is in the trunk. We'll show you in a moment how to open the pressure relief valve on it so that you can move the top manually and put it into a position like this to take out the cylinders, or at least to inspect the cylinders for leaks. So here we have the trunk open, obviously, and I'm going to show you where the pump is. Right here, there is a handy dandy plastic piece that you can just move the lever on and take it out. And here's the pump inside of a sound absorbing foam enclosure. Now, 2 ways to deal with this. Your car comes equipped with a soft top tool. This is actually a 4mm Allen wrench that you put into this bolt pressure relief valve on the pump and turn counterclockwise to relieve pressure if you want to manually close the top, or that you turn clockwise to make the pump operational again. And actually I will pull this foam cover here to show you what is behind. Here's our hydraulic pump with the electric motor. Here's the reservoir. You can see that the fluid level here is exactly at maximum. It should be between maximum and minimum, never below minimum. If your fluid level is below minimum, then you certainly have a leak somewhere. Most likely that leak is from one of the hydraulic cylinders. The pump, as you can see, has 10 hoses coming into it, and to take this pump out, you can actually take this pump out without removing any further trim. If you can get your 10mm socket onto 1, 2, 3 bolts down here, and you also disconnect the wiring harness over here that is simply unclipped. And lastly, there are 3 bolts, Allen bolts, holding an aluminum plate in place on this pump. If you unbolt those 3 bolts, then tuck a little bit on each hose, you can ultimately pull all hoses out together, and there you can then pull the whole pump out. Before we get into the removal of all the cylinders and the pump, there's one thing I'd like to show you, that is how to keep the top open. You've probably learned at some point that if you stop the top operation somewhere mid-cycle, like the way it is now, that after 10 minutes or so, whether the ignition is on or off, the system will time out, and suddenly the rear bow, the part with the glass in it, comes down, as well as the front bow and the storage cover. Everything will relax and fall down. What would happen in that case is the rear bow goes down first, and the tonneau cover slowly ends up on top of it, making it ugly or damaging it. So you want to avoid that. The interesting thing is that if this happens where the rear bow comes down, it's an illogical position for the soft top computer, because normally with the tonneau cover open, the rear bow is never down. So if this whole system relaxes, collapses on itself, and the rear bow is down, then the readout from the sensors says the rear bow is down, tonneau cover is up. That's illogical. So suddenly you get the warning in the dash that says soft top unlatched, something like that. And you have to figure out how to undo this problem. Well, if this was relaxed right now, then I would lift up the rear bow and the front bow at the same time, and suddenly everything will work such that you can lift it up again. Then you have somebody, while you're holding the top in this position, you have somebody turn the ignition on and push the top open or top close button. As soon as the pump runs again, the top will be latched in this position. It will be stable in this position again for the next 10 minutes or so. If you want to work on anything inside this area, you may as well buy yourself a little insurance that avoids the tonneau cover falling onto the soft top. And a simple thing would be a 2x4 exactly 2 feet long. You stick it in here and against the striker that goes into the latch over here. I think this is pretty clear. 2 feet long. When this rear bow, we want to get it into the gap between the weather seal and the rear fender. When the rear bow falls down, it will miss this 2x4, and at least you will not have anything damaged. Still, again, if you want to get the top to work afterwards, you still have to lift up both ends and have somebody push the button, as I just explained. And one more thing of interest, back here are the rollover bars. Every modern convertible has to have rollover protection, so these aluminum pieces will come bolting up if you ever have a serious accident where the computers detect that you're in a crash where you might need protection, rollover protection. These aluminum bars will be coming up. Don't do that. So here we have the tonneau lift cylinder that we're going to take out. It's pretty simple. You need an 1/8 inch or similar small flat screwdriver. You put the screwdriver under the steel spring that goes around the outside of the ball joint. You walk the spring clip up about a 1/4 inch. You don't have to walk it off the cylinder completely. Actually, you don't want to do that. Just walk it up about a 1/4 inch. That way the clip stays spread open, and you can now just pull the ball joint off the ball here. Now you want to support the other side of the storage cover with like a 2 foot long 2x4, and then we move on to removing the bottom part of this cylinder. So here we have removed the top of the tonneau cylinder already. slid the clip back into place where it belongs. And how do you remove the bottom? Well, you can actually very carefully wiggle and turn, and the lower ball joint will become disjointed all by itself. Don't force it, just wiggle back and forth a little bit until you see it giving, and there it comes out by itself. Now here you see I've already loosened a T10 torque screw, and that screw holds the plastic cover in place. Don't lose the screw. We can now pull the cover off this cylinder. Well, we could if the clip wasn't in the way, but it can be done. And that gives us access to the hoses. The hoses are fastened with stainless steel sliding clips. The clips slide in this rail. You slide the bottom clip out that way, top clip out that way, and the hoses will come off. Obviously you want to put the hoses into a Ziploc bag or similar so they don't mess up the inside of your car while the cylinder's out. If you later on move the top, there will be a little bit of fluid coming out of these hoses, not a lot, but some, so that's why you want to put these hoses into Ziploc bags and have them in a safe place in here. To slide the clips out of the rail such that they release the hoses, you basically want to have a small screwdriver. Well, I don't have one at hand right now, so I'll use these T10 Torx. Imagine this was like a 1/4 inch flat screwdriver. You just hold it here and tap on it, and there I have already loosened the clip, and I can push the clip out. It'll make sense to you once you get at it. Then lastly, there is the travel sensor. Two ways to deal with it. This is a Hall effect travel sensor that basically tells the computer when the cylinder is completely extended. Two ways to take it out. You can gently pry under it with a small flat screwdriver. Here I have one, and imagine the hose was already out of the way. Now you can gently pry under here, very gently, don't mess things up, and there you go. This travel sensor comes out. Now I haven't removed the hose yet, so there wasn't enough room to take it out. I just wanted to demonstrate how this sensor comes out. You don't have to remove the sensor, you can also leave it in place and instead disconnect here at the wiring harness. Let's see how this clip works. You pull release in the right place and this connector will come apart. Oh, here's a pin to be pushed, and at that point you can disconnect the Hall sensor wiring harness from the car. And with the hoses removed, now you have the first cylinder out that you can either send into Top Hydraulics or get one in core exchange. If you had a core exchange cylinder available already, you could just hook the hoses back up and the Hall sensor and put everything back in place. Now I'll show you the removal of the right tension bar cylinder removal. The right one is a little trickier than the left one, simply because the right one has the two travel sensors on it, otherwise they're identical. So same as on the Tonneau cylinder, we want to walk our flat small screwdriver. We want to put that under the circlip here and walk the circlip down its groove a little bit, close to a 1/4 inch down. Now we can turn and wiggle, and this cylinder will, this ball joint will actually come off the ball. I'll put it back on. Well, I may as well leave it off. I have already done the same clip removal on the bottom, and we can now walk the bottom of the cylinder off the ball joint with a little tension. And I'm getting too far into the video here. Sorry if I'm in the way. If this clip is properly walked off, then we can get the lower ball joint walked off the ball. Now we're still stuck with 2 hoses and 2 travel sensors to deal with. It's too tricky to, well, it's not that tricky. We could undo the zip tie here and undo the connector for the travel sensors, or we can simply, just like we did before, stick our screwdriver in here and carefully walk the travel sensors out of their groove, and just later on put them back in. It's obvious which one goes where because the shorter wire is here on top, the longer wire goes to the bottom. And lastly, you see this little spring on the retaining bracket. You can turn the cylinder around and with a T10 undo that bracket, or you can simply unhook this spring from this bracket. With that, your cylinder is off, short of the hoses. I've shown you the hose removal for the Tonneau cylinder already. You just slide these retaining clips up and down, pull out the hoses, and then later on reinstall the cylinder the same way, and you're done. So I'll just put this back on and we'll move on to the next one. So now we're going to show you how to remove the interior quarter panel in order to get access to the main lift cylinder that is mounted horizontally over here. To get the interior quarter panel out, you really only need to know how to do it. Then it's easy. First, take the seats out. The bottom seats, just pull up a couple tabs and couple guides. Then you will find 2 T27 Torx screws, one on this side, one on the other side. Take the Torx screws out and you will be able to lift this seat bench up. I'll have to climb in here, lift it up, and next you get access to a T27 Torx screw over here. I hope that shows in the video. And there's another one hiding in front of the bolt for the seatbelt buckle, another T27 down here. You also want to loosen the bolt for the seatbelt buckle itself, that is a T50 or equivalent star wrench. And lastly, you want to slide up this little cover to give access to another T27 bolt here. So once you've removed 1, 2, 3 T27s and loosened the seatbelt buckle, and important, you have taken this nylon string from the hinge cover off its far point, then you can wiggle and pull and take this whole quarter panel out so that you get access to the main lift cylinder. Okay, I actually made a mistake. The Torx bolts are actually T30s, not T27, T30, and I forgot to point out 2 more bolts. We talked about removing the cover and the bolt behind the cover here. Well, now this lets us remove the trim panel, and behind the trim panel there was another T30 bolt hiding here. So here is your 4th bolt, and then there's yet a 5th T30 bolt that is up here. Here we have already moved the hinge cover back, and we're finding another T30 bolt behind the main lift cylinder shaft. Now be careful, don't scratch up this main lift cylinder shaft. The proper thing to do is actually taking out the pin that holds the end of the lift cylinder here. That is really easily done. You just put a flat screwdriver behind this circlip and walk the circlip up the pin and pull out the pin. And I may as well do that right now, if I have a small flat screwdriver at hand. So I did find my little flat screwdriver. To take this circlip out, we just put the screwdriver behind one of the edges in here and slowly walk it out in a controlled motion. Now we can push out this pin after we pound on it a little bit. We don't have to do that right now. I'm going to show you next. the removal of the bolt, just because my tool is nice and round. It does not damage the shaft. We do sometimes get in cylinders with damaged shaft just because people used a little bit rougher tools than this. So this T30 bolt is out. We also needed to pull up this weather stripping. It has 2 tabs in here and 1 tab here. So first we bend it up, then we pull it out, and now all we have to do is wiggle a little bit and our quarter panel is out. That now gives us access to the other mounting pin on this main lift cylinder. We again take off the circlip and pound a little. I haven't pounded on this before. Let's see. Well, with a little bit more effort and or a drift pin pushing this way, this pin will come out, and you do the same on this end and you can pull the cylinder out. And again, you will have to push out the 3 travel sensors, Hall effect travel sensors, and once the cylinder has been pulled out farther, you can get the hose clips removed and pull the hoses out. The best thing to do is first to take this pin out, push the cylinder shaft back in, so 1, you get a little bit of fluid back into the pump, you have less fluid in the cylinder, and 2, you don't risk damaging the shaft of this cylinder while you're wiggling around with taking out the removing the travel sensors and the hoses. And this is the more difficult side. The right side, the left side doesn't have any travel sensors. The whole job is not all that bad when you know how to do it. So here we are. We've swapped all 5 hydraulic cylinders on this car plus the pump, and actually this car showed up at 5 p.m. A friend showed up, needed some help, and we said, oh, why don't we just swap your hydraulics and take a video of that. And here we are. It's still the same evening. We got it all done. One more comment is obviously you need to refill fluid in the pump as the system is cycling, because the cylinders got in there with full of air instead of fluid, and the system is self-venting, so you need to keep refilling the pump a couple times as the roof cycles. Anyway, having said all of that, we have never worked on a Jaguar before, never even saw the top cycling before. It took a total of 4 or 5 hours to swap the whole hydraulic system and do this video. So that was 2 guys working on it, 1 with a camera. So a couple people can easily swap this hydraulic system in an afternoon if they know what they're doing, or 1 person can do it in a day. Now, let's see if it works. Ignition on. There we go. Woohoo!